back in black, playing Pathfinder, Kingmaker, and today we're gonna talk about the wizard. So I guess the first question on your mind is gonna be, what's the difference between a wizard and a sorceress? Well, the sorceress, to a sorceress, magic comes innate, right? Maybe it's a half dragon, maybe it's been cursed by someone or something, but he draws his powers from within, while the wizard kind of takes it from outside. He kind of obtains knowledge from books, maybe reads scrolls and stuff like that. It's kind of the wizard. So if you talk about the wizard in role-playing terms, it's kind of the guy who's always studying books. He's very intelligent, very knowledgeable. He's not the strongest fighter. He's maybe very frail, walks maybe with a stick like Gandalf or something. That's kind of the archetypical wizard. Of course, you can build your wizard in many ways, and we're gonna talk about maybe one way of building the wizard here. So if you're interested in more unique build guides, how to put different characters or maybe different classes together into one class, then this is not the video for you. This is going to be a general overview of the wizard, and I'm going to specifically talk about the more archetypical wizard, the wizard that has a very breadth of knowledge, where it can do many different things, and we're going to evaluate also the subclasses and the choices by that thing, because the wizard's strength, in my opinion, comes from the fact that he can buff your team up. He gains a very good, while he has a very, okay, if we talked about the bad things about the wizard first, because he has a lot of good things. Usually you do it in the reverse, right? But now I'm gonna do it the other way. So the bad thing about the wizard, he has, much like the sorceress, he has a very, very bad basic attack bonus progression. Basic attack bonus is used for hitting something with attacks, such as ranged attacks or melee attacks or touched attacks, things like that. So he has absolute horrible progression with his base attack bonus. He maxes out at 2 attacks at level 20, which is, absolutely horrible. If you compare this to a warrior, which has 4 attacks, which gives +1 base attack bonus per level, your wizard won't be able to hit anything, especially if you play on the higher difficulties. Because yes, we're going to talk about this as if you're playing on the highest difficulty, which is unfair. But keep in mind that anything that works on unfair also works on the lower difficulties. So that's one of the bad parts. Also, the wizard is one of the most frail characters in the game. They start off with 1d6 hit die, and while they can buff themselves up with spells, they're not really as suited for tanking as other classes. They're kind of the worst tanks in the game. They're very, very frail, very, very easily killed. So you need to protect your wizard, but in exchange, the wizard will buff your party to insane levels. So usually when I talk about these classes, you can see the other class guides down below. I talk about them in regarding 2 axes. So for instance, the wizard, or the fighter I should say, I usually use as an example because it has 100% combat prowess but 0% utility, while on the bard, on the other hand, has that flipped. He has 100% utility but 0% combat prowess. Now the wizard is often referred to as the best class in the game, especially if you talk to people who play pen and paper, and that is true if you're if you're a master of foresight and you can foresee any situation that would ever happen. Then yes, wizard is kind of the strongest class in the game, but he's a little bit different if we talk about the pen and paper version and the game version. We're also going to talk about that later on. But if I would evaluate the wizard along these axes, I would say that he's 80% combat prowess and also 80% utility. It's a very, very strong class, but we're going to talk about why he's still balanced, because it seems like he breaks the mold, right? It seems like 80 plus 80, that's like 160% good. Is that even possible? Well, if we, for instance, were to have an arena, we were to pit a wizard versus a monk, for instance, then the monk would probably eat up the wizard before the wizard could even get off a single spell, right? Yet I say that he has very, very high combat prowess, and that comes from 2 things. First of all, he's able to cast spells before anyone else. He has the fastest spell progression of any class in the game, and also he's able to buff up your party. While he does not have by himself, he's maybe not as strong as, for instance, to compare to, I did a Sylvan Sorceress run, you can check that down, link in the description, which starts off with a pet, which can buff up, polymorph into a dragon or something. The Wizard Dread can't really compete with that. If a Sylvan Sorceress comes at you with a polymorphed Smilodon into a dragon, you're gonna die very, very fast. Probably before you get any real spells off. But he has very high level spells, which are very, very strong. Usually they're best for AoE and utility purposes, but still they're very strong. And you need to keep in mind that if you compare lower difficulties to higher difficulties, it's very different. Also, if you compare pen and paper to Pathfinder Kingmaker, it's very different. First of all, if you play pen and paper, then you can't sleep anywhere. For instance, if you're in a cave or something, if you're under stress, maybe you have some time pressure, you can't sleep. In this game, it's pretty much safe to sleep at any point. You can always get your spells back, because yes, your spells, much like the sorcerers, they refresh when you sleep. Then there's another difference, because on the lower difficulties, your melee classes will be much more effective on low level than your spellcasting classes, because your spellcasting classes will usually have a lower damage amount than the melee classes. But this balances out in unfair in a way where usually your spellcasters is much stronger on the lower levels because they can actually hit something. Because on the highest difficulties, even the first enemies that you encounter will have 22 armor class. This means that even if you buff up your melee character as much as you can, you charge in, you flank, you have, +5 modifier from your strength, you have everything in your favor, still it's less than 50% chance that you're even gonna hit something. The wizard and the sorceress doesn't have this problem. They can go spell specialization, burning hands, and get 3 d4s and probably just one-shot everything in a cone in front of them, and then just gonna own everything. Because in this game there are 3 types of saves. There's 4 types which you need to care about. First is the armor save. You're usually not super concerned about the armor save with the wizard. This is mostly relevant if you use touch attacks, which I don't think the wizard is the best at using, but you can do that. The other saves are the fortitude, the reflex, and the will save. The fortitude save is how sturdy your body is, how easy you resist diseases and stuff like that, how you can hold your body together, basically. The next one is the reflex save. That is how agile you are, if you can jump away from fireballs, if you can do stuff like that. And the last one is the will save. The will save is how mentally strong you are, how able you are to defer, like the demons in your mind that come in and say, try to mind control you and like go there, do that, do this, how able you are to resist that. So these are the 3 types of save, and in my humble opinion, the sorceress is the best to utilize these 3 different categories if you're just talking damage spells, because the sorceress can switch between 3 different sources. So for instance, if you're up against something like a big ogre or something, then maybe that ogre is not so smart, so you can use will-based saves, and he's probably not that agile, so you can use maybe reflex saves or reflex-based save spells. But the wizard is probably not going to be your main damage dealer. He can deal a lot of damage, but that kind of requires you to know which spells that will be effective in the environment that you're going into, because the wizard prepares his spells every day, and he has, a set amount of spells that is prepared, while the sorcerers can just change on the fly which spells they want to use. So the wizard is more utility and is more about the breadth that we talked about earlier. So let's talk about the subclasses then of wizard. So this is the normal wizard. It doesn't gain very much. He actually gains more than you can see here, because he gains a specialization in a school, which we can have a look at, and again some other things like a familiar and stuff like that. Also, in this game, by the way, we're talking about familiars, so don't forget to mention it. In this game, your familiar can't be targeted by your enemies, so he can never be killed, which is quite different from pen and paper. Also, he can't attack. So let's keep that in mind. First one is Arcane Bomber. He starts off with a bomb that he can cast, and he can use his spells. He removes spells that is prepared to instead cast a bomb, and that bomb can be that bomb is increased by the spell, so he gains twice the spell's level as damage, and then he gains, let's see here, he gains an attack bonus equal to the spell or something like that. So this guy is, if you want to have a wizard which is also more of a touch attack damage dealer, if you want to spec a little bit into dexterity, you could go with this alternative. I'm not a super big fan of this class, and much of this is because of this right here. He has 4 opposition school. An opposition school means that you will have to use 2 spell slots, because as I said earlier, the wizard prepares spells. Not like the sorcerer, which has them innate, he prepares them, and he will need to use 2 spell slots to prepare 1 spell from his opposition schools. And this kind of takes away from, as I said earlier, the breadth of knowledge, because you will be very limited. You can't, cherry pick a little bit from this school, a little bit from this school, because this will kind of limit you. So I don't really like that. But you can, it's still a viable class. I mean, it still gains most benefit that the wizard has anyways, and if you have 4 schools that you're probably not gonna use that much anyway, then maybe this is class for you. Thessalian Specialist is the next class, and this guy also is a little bit limited. What he gains is that he gains 2 additional spell slots of each spell that he can cast, which is very, very good because it gives him more spell cast, of course. But he has a restriction that the Thessalian Specialist does not get to customize his choice of opposition school. That choice is selected for him when he chooses specialization. These restrictions are more significant than those of most wizards. A Thessalian wizard can never prepare a spell that is in his prohibited school. He treats those spells as if they're not on the wizard spell list. So you kind of lose out on utility here. You can't use spells from one school, and that can hinder you a little bit because most schools have useful spells, especially when it comes to buffing, which will be one of your biggest responsibilities in your party, is to buff your characters. So maybe we should talk a little bit about buffing here. So, buffing. Buffing is very important, and it's one of the major roles of the wizard. You are probably gonna be, if you're a wizard, the main buffer in your party. This is probably true also if you play pen and paper. So what do you want to do? Well, you want to use all spells which stack. You need to keep in mind how things stack in this game. So first of all, you can cast basic stuff as +4 to 1 stat, but keep in mind that these are enhancement bonuses. For instance, Bear's Endurance, Eagle Splendor, stuff like that. These things are enhancement bonuses. These usually don't stack with your the things that you have on your characters. So for instance, if you're something like level 8, level 10, around those levels, you're usually gonna have +4 to all stats anyways, so these things are not gonna do much for you. But on lower levels, these are very useful to have, especially your warrior wants more strength, for instance. Maybe your ranger wants more dexterity or something. So these are your responsibility usually to casting your ranger, because you're gonna get access to those spells before the ranger. The ranger's gonna get it on level 4 or something, you're gonna let it on level 3 or something, you're gonna get that spell. So you're gonna get it quite quickly. Also, it's very important, or I think it's very important, that if you have a animal companion or multiple animal companion, that you buff those up. The most important things that you put on these are gonna be mid to late game spells, such as animal growth, which gives them a bigger size. This doesn't work the same as in pen and paper. In pen and paper, they actually grow, and that can be quite cumbersome because they take up too much space if it is like a narrow corridor. But in the game, they don't grow, they just get better stats. Also, I would polymorph all my animal companions into dragons, because they have 5 attacks, which your companions, depending if they're not Smilodons, they're not going to have 5 attacks, so they get more attacks from that, and they can give a very, very good stat boost out of it. So I would definitely polymorph all my companions into dragons. Also, I would buff up all my melee characters with heroism and displacement and haste. Those are the 3 most important spells to have on melee characters. Displacement gives them a 50% chance whenever something attacks them that they miss with that, 50% miss chance. Heroism and greater heroism, it starts off at +2 to your attack rolls, and then it becomes +4, and this also works for a save. It's a morale bonus, so it might not stack with some cleric spells, but it will stack with all your equipment. And then you get haste, which most notably gives 1 extra attack to all your melee companions, and that's very important that you cast that. When you've done that round of buffing, you can just go into like spellcasting, fireball, lightning strike mode. You can just unload all the rest of the spells that you have available to you. And also, in this game, it will be very, very easy, because you're probably gonna spot your enemies before they spot you, so you can just buff up your party beforehand, and usually also the buffs last long enough to last an entire encounter anyway. So you can just buff your party up before you go into battle, and then that will be it. That was my rant on buffing, because I think it's very important. It's a very important role of the wizard to know how to buff and which spells that they actually need. Also, you will have to make sure that for different encounters that you have different things. As for instance, in late game, you will need to pick up Mind Blank, because else your melee characters will be charmed forever, and that's not super good. You need to pick up anything that protects against death magic. Is very important to have increased fortitude save and increased will save. You will be the one who provides immunity to elements. If you go into a room with a lot of traps, for instance, they're usually fire-based, so giving your party immunity to fire and lightning is very important. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about buffing. That was another side run. There's so much to talk about. Okay, so that's the Thessalonian Specialist. Now the Scroll Savant. The Scroll Savant's bonus ability is that they have Scroll Focus. They add half their class level to use Magic Device, which is very, very good because you can use like Cleric Scrolls. For instance, you want Restoration, Great Restoration, and stuff like that. Or on your guy. So maybe if you go with a Scroll Savant, you don't even have to have a Cleric. I haven't played in this way, so I don't know for sure, but I think that would be a viable way. So I think the Scroll Savant is one of the better wizard options. They don't get any, more opposition schools or anything. So in my mind, at least, the Scroll Savant seems like a stable, good choice if you want to go with a subclass. But we're gonna, for just illustration purposes, we're gonna go with the wizard here. I'm not gonna go a complete build guide. I'm not gonna build up level 20, but I'm gonna talk about the early game and how to distribute stats and stuff like that. So let's go with the wizard. Here there's a lot of specialist schools, and they have a lot of abilities. I'm not gonna talk about all of them. I'm just gonna talk about briefly how they work. So you select a specialist school here, and the specialist school come with different benefits. They usually have one passive benefit, which means you always have it. They have one active benefit that you gain access to from level 1, which can be, so for instance, let's see, I think evocation here. Okay, already selected. The evocation, for instance, starts off with a force missile. As a standard action, you can unleash a force missile that automatically strikes a foe as a magic missile. This 1d4 damage plus the damage from your intense spell's evocation power. So this is quite good when you start off with that level 1, because you have even more spell costs. You get 3 plus your intelligence modifier. So you will have a lot. If you have magic missiles and force missile, that will carry you through the early game, for instance. So again, one of these early game spellcasters can do some buff you, some deal damage, some deal other things. Then you usually gain something between level 6 and level 8, which is like a medium abilities. As for instance, this evocation, which is the school based on dealing damage, you get elemental wall. And a mobile blazing curtain, you create a wall of fire, and the wall deals damage to anything who passes through it. And then the damage increases of it. And then some of these schools also have a level 20 power, but keep in mind that in this game, you might not even get to level 20. When I completed the game with my Sorcerer's Party, I completed at level 16. But again, a level 20 ability. For instance, the evocation gain, whenever you cast an evocation spell, you roll twice to penetrate creature spell resistance and take the better roll. So these level 20 abilities are often super duper strong. The downside, of course, being that you probably won't get there, and it's just in the very, very ultra late game that you get access to them. So don't plan your build around having these level 20 abilities, is what I would recommend. You can also go with Universalist, which has it's a little bit different from the other school. They kind of break the mold in that you're not really specialized in a school, you're specialized in everything. And they gain some nice benefits. As you can see, they gain the most number of benefits, if you look at it that way. Here they gain Meta Magic Mastery, which means that they extend or alter the range of your next spell as though they're using the extend spell. So they're kind of focused on the meta magic feats, and that's what the Universalist school is. And then you have Necromancy, which is based on undeath, on summoning undead minions. You have Illusion, which is often like creating mirror images and stuff of yourself. And stuff like that. I'm not gonna talk about all the schools because it'll take a while if we're gonna go through all of those. So it's already becoming a little bit ranty, I know. We're gonna select Universalist here, and then we get to go to the here we can select an Arcane Bomb, which can be used to restore one spell, or we can select a familiar. I would probably go for a familiar because they can't get damaged in this game, they can't die, so there's no real downside to having them. And since I don't want to put much dexterity on my character, I would go with a hare. The hero gains +4 bonus on initiative and +2 on perception check. These are all they're not super strong, honestly, the familiars, but this gains a tangible benefit. You gain the +4 initiative. This means that we can go down lower in dexterity because we're probably gonna stay out of harm's way anyway. so dexterity won't matter too much to us, even though it hurts our armor save a little bit. Our role is to be, you know, way away from any danger. So what I would go for on a typical wizard, for the hardest difficulty, is unfair. I would go for something like max out intelligence, max out constitution. It's pretty much all you need. In my opinion, the only thing you need on a wizard is intelligence. Anything else you can just experiment with however you want. Also keep in mind that you don't need to start necessarily. If you're going with a special build, if you're going with a multi-class, now I'm talking about a pure wizard build, pure, as I said, the breadth of knowledge, the utility build, then it's something like this. But if you want to do something else, if you want to do something more combat-y, if you want to be able to use touch attacks, then maybe you want dexterity and stuff like that, then feel safe to go down in constitution and go down in intelligence. You don't need to have, I would say the lowest intelligence I would ever go would be 14 or 15, because then you can add +4 to your stats as you level up, and then you can get to 19, so you can cast your highest level spells, but you don't need to spend all these early points, because as you can see, it's getting quite costly to get up to 18. If you just remove 1 point here, we get 4 extra ability points, so it's quite costly to get this distribution, but in my opinion, this is all you need. All you need is intelligence, so that you're able to cast your spells, so that you're able to get more spells, and then everything else is just a little bit of gravy on top. It just adds a little bit of flavor to the character. Here I would definitely go intelligence. Also, this +5 modifier translates to more skill points, so that's quite nice. And then you can do anything. You can do with dexterity or you can do wisdom. I would probably put this on wisdom because I don't want to have too horrible of a will save. In the ultra late game, I keep repeating this because it's very important. It's very important if you want to be close to something. This does not really apply too much to the wizard because you usually stay way away from any fighting. But you need to have a high fortitude or will save to be even remotely close to combat, because everything has death magic, which usually targets your fortitude and your will save, and it's so easy to just get one shot by anything that you come close to. So, for the skill points, I think the most important ones to pick up on your wizard is going to be your knowledge arcana and knowledge world. This kind of fits with the character. He's very knowledgeable. He's going to be the guy who identifies all your items for you. And also, since we have high intelligence, we're going to be like naturally good at this. So it fits the character. Then what you do depends kind of your party composition and if this is your main character or not. If this is your main character, you're going to have more ability scores available to you. As I see here, I'm doing new mercenary, so I don't have as many ability points available to me. So maybe I would go something like a little bit higher strength or dex or something, even these out a little bit, if this was my main character. But what I would go for if this is my main character, I would go for persuasion, because there's a couple of good persuasion checks which can give you XP in this game. Also, I would definitely go use magic device on a character like this. Even though we have a minus modifier, we're going to at some point at some later levels be able to have maybe +10 or something and use magic device. And if you're a Thessalonian specialist that we talked about also, that subclass, you will be able to cast scrolls, and I think scrolls are very, very good to be able to use on your wizard. And also, if you don't have a cleric in your party, it's going to be crucial because you're going to need to cast restoration and greater restoration with this guy. So, for abilities, what I would go for is, first, I would select toughness as my non-wizard ability, because it gives 3+ hit points, which makes you maybe able to survive 1 hit of something. Your role is not to be a tank, but I think toughness is one of the better abilities you can pick up early, because it gives a big relative boost to hit points at this low a level, and there's not much else that you need on level 1, so that's why. Then I would select spell focus evocation, which is because we want to have spell specialization, and we're going to spell specialize in burning hands. Any creature in the area of flames takes 1d4 points of fire damage per caster level, and because we have spell specialization, this will become 3d4, and this makes us able to get to the early game. And if you want to see how to do that, then check out the link in the description, where I did a sorcerer's run where I did exactly this thing. So this can kind of carry you through the early game in Unfair, this build. And then we get to spells here. This will depend a lot on your party composition, but there are a couple of spells which stand out as always being useful. One of them, I think the most important ones here are, by order of importance, I would say, Burning Hands, Magic Missile, Expeditious Retreat, Mage Armor. And then you can pretty much do anything after that. So for the alignment then, you can go with anything. As I said, the wizard is not super good at multi-classing. There's nothing really that comes to mind which you want to do with your wizard, such as, for instance, if you play a sorceress, you might want to multi-class into monk or multi-class into paladin and pick up their charisma bonus to different stuff. The wizard can't really do that, so I don't really see any downside in using any other alignment, so just go with anything you feel like here. So, that pretty much concludes my wizard guide. I know it was a little bit ranty, but thank you so much for watching. See you next time.